Hello and welcome to the Our Prenup Lawyer podcast, where you and I get to learn more about prenups as I interview professionals from the fields of family law, couples counseling, and wealth management. I'm your host, Libby Garabedian. Let's get started. The information provided in this podcast is prepared by Our Prenup Lawyer for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. The information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. This is not legal advice or a substitute for obtaining legal advice from an attorney. A person listening or watching should not rely upon it in any manner without engaging professional counsel. The podcast is intended to communicate general information and, because recorded, may not be current. On this episode of Our Prenup Lawyer, I'm joined by Kaylin Dillon. Kaylin is a certified financial planner and founder of Kaylin Dillon Financial Planning, KDFP. Launched in 2021 to support couples navigating finances together, whether through prenuptial agreements, blended families, or maintaining separate assets. Her mission is to make money conversations safe, transparent, and accessible, helping couples plan their financial future in ways that honor both mine and ours. Whether they're engaged, newly married, or part of a blended family, Kaylin aims to simplify complex financial decisions so couples can build trust and shared clarity around money. Welcome, Kaylin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to talk about your firm. But before we do, I want to know a little bit more about your background. So you worked at Morgan Stanley, but how did you get started in the field of finance?
Yeah, I really fell into the job. I thought that I was taking a part-time job while I finished grad school. I didn't have plans of going into finance. But I loved it and decided I wanted to go full time. And so I didn't study finance in college. I majored in languages and got my master's in East Asian language and culture. But I loved all of the work that we were doing at Morgan Stanley and was really eager to learn more. So I learned on the job and was there for 9 years. And I loved it. I loved the financial planning side, especially, and a lot of the complex planning that we did there. So that's really how I got started.
That's awesome. Such, a unique way to come into this field, but it's amazing what you're doing. So what made you decide that there was a need to bridge the gap between prenups and standard financial planning?
To be honest, where I saw the gap was more just the need for a financial advisor who could really be accepting of couples who have some sort of approach where maybe they don't consider all their finances combined. It's really common for financial advisors to say, well, the best thing for you to do is to combine your finances. And for one, that's actually a really vague term and phrase that, a lot of people will say, well, we combine our finances. But then when you look under the hood, actually, they don't necessarily treat everything as 100% combined. So that's where I saw the need. And so then the question became like, how do I communicate that more efficiently to people starting my own firm? And it took me a little while to come up with it, but I realized, well, my husband and I have a prenup, and it was kind of like the first step that laid a foundation for here's where we draw some lines. It didn't create 100% of here's exactly how we manage our finances, but I realized like that was kind of like the first step in that direction, and it was easier to communicate to people. Like, here's a thing that I'm focused on, and at first I was imagining I was just imagining I was creating the practice for people in my situation personally, because I felt like that didn't exist out there. But as soon as I started talking about prenups, I got so I was thinking I was talking to people who already were married and already had prenups. But I got a lot of inquiries from engaged couples who were considering a prenup and just paralyzed and intimidated by the process, wondering, how do I actually know if I even need one? And they were very curious, but they really didn't want their first phone call to be to an attorney. And how do you even know what attorney to call? Which is why I love the business that you've created here. It's brilliant. Um, we really do. I mean, it's really the people reaching out to me who showed me where this other gap is in bridging, and that we needed to bridge this gap between like those questions. Do I need a prenup? What's the best way to go about it? And actually getting one.
Right, because there's definitely a lot of myths around prenups and that financial aspect. Not every attorney has the background like you do and is able to, instill that knowledge onto their clients. But how does estate planning, investment management, and other future planning fit into the actual drafting of a prenup?
Yeah. Well, in some cases, it's literally part of the terms. So you can include estate planning terms in your prenup, like in addition to saying, here's how we would split assets in a divorce, you also say, here's what would happen to my assets if I die first. Here's what would happen to your assets if you die first. And there can also be terms in the prenup around investment management. But really, I think the value that couples get out of considering and getting a prenup comes from thinking about these topics, having conversations, and forming at least some sort of a plan. And in the case of my clients, we make very specific plans in terms of like, here's your financial plan, here's how how we're going to manage our finances, that sort of thing, including investments. But even for people who aren't going to get that specific pre-marriage, considering a prenup and going through all of these topics, it really helps you lay that foundation and get some clarity around how do we want to manage our finances.
Right. So, in thinking about the way you work with clients, what types of services are offered at your firm for the different stages of life?
Yeah, at my financial planning firm, I do one-time financial plans for engaged couples and take them through the whole financial planning process. It's 5 sessions, but they have my support for a full 12 months. And I really have them focus on, how are you managing your finances right now? How are you splitting expenses? What do you want to change? And that's really where we start, because how you're managing just the day-to-day expenses, splitting expenses, and either sharing or not sharing income, that's the starting point. And you can't really have conversations about your long-term plans without figuring out just what income is shared and what expenses are shared. We really need to know that information. So we start there, and then we look at a full long-term financial plan. What are your goals? Are you on track to save for those goals? And a lot of times for engaged couples, they're not necessarily already on track for, say, funding a vacation home and an early retirement. But we can look at a number of scenarios and see, what would it take? What is a good savings goal for you to be aiming for if you're not there yet? And we also look at, what's strategies for your first joint tax return, and what health plan should the two of you be on? If you both have employer plans, which one's better, or should you stay on your own separate employer plans? So a lot of those big financial questions that come up when you're getting married, they can be overwhelming, and that's the process that we go through. And I'll also look at all of their existing investments and make recommendations there too. And then my other services it's really all the same services. It's just on an ongoing basis instead of a one-time basis. So they're pretty similar, except that when clients are going through the one-time plan, if that's what they've signed up for, I know it's not their intention up front to stay with me long term, and that's totally fine. For engaged couples, they might not be ready to commit to a long-term relationship with a financial advisor. And so it does include a lot more of like education and checklists from me that I'm handing over, which you do kind of have to be the right personality to take a lot of checklists of to-dos and recommendations and run with it. And so I have had some clients come back and they say, you know what, actually, we didn't do a single thing on the list. We do want to work with you and make sure we're actually making progress on these items. But some people are a really great fit to just take those instructions and run with them. So that's the biggest difference between my services is on a one-time basis, you get a lot of instructions, you have to run with it. And if you sign up for ongoing, you get all the same services. And I can actually manage your investments for you instead of making the recommendations for you to implement.
Yeah, a little more hands-on over a longer period of time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So, what is something that people should be doing to improve their financial literacy?
Oh, that's a good question. I really think it's more than financial literacy. The thing I wish more people were doing was just having really intentional conversations so that they could have clarity about how they want to be managing their finances, especially in a relationship. And it's never going to be something that's static. It always has to be an ongoing conversation because life's always changing. Your expenses are always changing. Jobs are changing. Health, like family, all of it. It's just, it needs to be an ongoing conversation. There's this tendency out there that I understand to wish that there was like a blanket approach that would work for everyone. It just sounds simpler. And I do think that some people are fortunate enough to just fall into a system that works really well for them. And I will say, when you're in a relationship and you have found a good flow and you're managing your finances in a way that feels like it's working really well, it feels fair, feels like you are on the same team and you're really working together, like it is such a good feeling. I do understand people's wish to like give that to other people. But how it translates is a lot of like, everyone should combine finances. It's just better. Or, no one should do X, Y, Z. I think the truth of the matter is that every relationship it's just as unique as every individual person. And not everyone is going to be on the same diet, and not everybody should be managing their finances in the same way and splitting expenses in the same way. It just does not work. So I just really wish people would put a little more effort into kind of figuring out what does work for them.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point you bring up, that there's this maybe misconception or hope that we can just have a blanket approach to everyone's finances, that you can just go to someone and they'll outline it and say, this is what you have to do for the rest of your life. But like you said, there's so many dynamic elements with financial planning and just how people's lives change with careers and money, that you really do have to be having those conversations to make sure everyone's on the same page and that you can move forward effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, what is your philosophy on the role that financial planners play within their clients' lives? Because obviously, money decisions aren't easy and there's a lot of emotions tied to them.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Well, we do have to walk a line of being providing a form of emotional support, but also making sure we're not stepping into therapy territory and that we're not misleading our clients into thinking we can provide that sort of support, because that can be a whole other, animal. But my philosophy is that financial planners should be making their clients feel better about how their money is working for them, whatever that means. And so for a lot of clients, and I know that if I were, a client of my own service, I would be the exact same way. I need to know the why of things. So it's a lot of understanding, why is this the recommendation, so that you can be your own check for, is this definitely appropriate for me? Or you are comfortable speaking up if it's just like not sitting well with you. Like I know you said we should invest this way, but I keep watching the account balance and it's making me stressed out, that sort of thing. It's like, well, I was, let's look back at why was that the recommendation, and then help clients feel empowered to speak up if they don't like it. But it is also important that your financial planner is clear about, here is what I recommend and why, not just like, I'm going to educate you and let you decide, because that's very overwhelming too. And then another thing I see in the world of people who call themselves financial advisors, we really are doing the same job. So I think that maybe that's confusing to people, or actually maybe they don't think about it at all. But for a lot of people who call themselves financial advisors, in my experience, there are a lot more of them. That's definitely not all, but there are a lot more of them who think like, I just need to be everything to my clients all the time. And so it's like a more of a concierge service, and maybe even less financial planning, but it's like, I'm managing your investments, but I'm also here, if you forget your child's social security number, like, you can call me on the weekend and I'll pull up the file. Like, they see one of their roles is like, I just want to make my clients' lives easier, period, whatever that means. And I think it's much more important. I do want to make my clients' lives easier, but I think it's really important that it's very clear up front, like, here are the services I provide, and that is it. So that it's clear, exactly what you're paying for and what you're going to get. And my clients know they're getting the same service as my other clients. There's no special client who's paying more and getting to call me more on the evenings or weekends. Like, here are my hours, here are my services, and you know what you're in for. And I also think that's important for helping clients, empower clients to remain a part of the management of their own finances. They don't feel like it's something they've fully outsourced and would be clueless if they lost their advisor. They feel like their planner is just adding value to their lives and not not taking over in a way that, like, they're now in the dark.
I like that. It's, you're bringing a collaborative approach to something that is educational, but the expectations are clear. There's transparency. So, like you said, people are remaining in control of their finances.
It's very similar to really how individual relationships should be. Like, on one hand, you can be pretty codependent. It sometimes seems like a really great situation, but it can end really badly, or it just doesn't actually in the end feel as great as you want it to. And then there's healthy interdependence where, yes, I'm providing a service and I am trying to make your life easier, but I'm going to make sure that you could step in at any point if you needed to.
Right. So now, just pivoting a little bit, if a couple doesn't have a prenup or a postnup, how does that affect their ability to rebuild financially if they get divorced?
Well, it really depends on what would have been, if we're comparing two situations, it really depends on what would have been in that prenup. Sometimes, to be honest, like, the most common plain vanilla prenup is not that different than default state laws. So in some ways, there is just maybe for most people, there is just a required rebuilding financially after divorce. And even if you had a prenup that felt like it left you with a really fair split, after a divorce, a lot of times you're going from, if it's not two incomes, you're still going from the contributions of two people, whether it's in terms of money or labor. You're going from having the contributions of two people to support your life to all of a sudden having the contributions of just one person to support a life that requires almost as much in terms of money and energy. And so just no matter what, it is difficult. I think the most important difference is that for people who take the time to get a prenup on the front end and have done it thoughtfully, that it's like an investment in your relationship and in your finances. And even if you are to get divorced later, odds are the fact that you went through that process should hopefully at least maybe minimize is a stretch, but like it should at least alleviate some of the extra pain points that come with the divorce process, because some things have already been decided. You've got a little more clarity. And then hopefully if you have assets that would have otherwise fallen into a gray area, like a home that one person owned before marriage that is now the marital home, if you've got clarity in that prenup on that subject, then you don't have as much to figure out. It's still a painful process for everybody, no matter what. And without a prenup, rebuilding is it's more of an unknown, and leading up to the finalization of that divorce, it's more of an unknown. So there's also just like a higher level of uncertainty throughout that whole process, and higher level of stress, wondering like, what am I going to end up with? What do I have to work with? What do I need to do going forward to afford my life? And just that higher level of uncertainty is really painful for people. But the truth of the matter is that if you had your combined marital estate, whether you had a prenup or not, once it's split and you each have to fund your lives with less, it's hard no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously there's lifestyle changes, but that prenup can serve as a bit of a safety net in some instances.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
So how can couples establish healthy financial boundaries within their relationships?
Yeah, that's similar to what I've touched on earlier. I think the best way to do that is to be talking about it. I think there are a lot of couples out there who aren't even saying the things they think and feel around money, and they're hoping that it just seems obvious or reasonable. But there's like really good, valuable stuff under those feelings if you're willing to get into it. And so the best way to do that is to be talking about money on a regular basis with your partner, and talking about how it feels and how certain decisions are sitting with you and what factors are you weighing when you're making decisions. And that's really the best way. But of course, a prenup can set actual legal financial boundaries for you too, if needed. And if you're not going to get a prenup, then but you're thinking about all of these subjects, then you definitely want to be well educated about what are the default state laws and how would that affect me if we got divorced, because that would influence some of the decisions you're making about how do we both invest in a home that we're purchasing? How do we title it? What accounts should our income be deposited in? All those, you really need to understand all of those topics before you get married so that you can make those decisions.
With that education aspect and understanding, what you're getting into, like you said, how can someone start planning more intentionally for their family's future?
Hiring a financial planner is a really good way to go if you're feeling overwhelmed at that idea. I do think, a lot of families are just surviving out there right now, and I totally get it. So a lot of times, especially if you've already started a family, it's just really hard. If you've got two working parents and you've already started a family, forget it. It's never going to be high on the priority list because there are too many other things. So hiring a planner is a really good way to make sure someone else is holding you accountable and taking you through the steps and giving you a bite size at a time so that it actually feels like a positive and productive process. But apart from hiring a financial planner, there are tons of great tools out there too. If for people who are like, I'm nowhere near affording that. I love, like, Vanguard has a couple of different types of free online calculators, where one of them is for figuring out what your retirement income would be. if you just plug in, like, here's how much I'm saving right now, here's how much I have in assets, and that's about it. So that's a good one for the really long term. And then they also have another one that's just, if you're trying to save for a particular goal, then you can just plug in, here's how much I'm already saving, or you can put 0 and just see, like, how much more do I need to be saving for that first home down payment, or for, a big trip that we want to take. So those free online tools are actually a really good starting point. And if you already have something down the line you're aiming for, like that first home purchase, that's a really good starting point for somebody to kind of get into the process of intentionally making a plan.
Yeah, and that's some great advice to really meet people wherever they're at.
I try my best.
No, it's great. Thank you. Now,
Yeah.
before we go, how can listeners reach you if they're interested in connecting?
Yeah, I am on Instagram at the Prenup Coach, and they can also find me at kaylindillon.com, and that's where I've got all of my financial planning resources and prenup resources.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kaylin. It was great talking to you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Of course. That's our show, folks. Thank you for listening to our Prenup Lawyer. Make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop a comment below. Follow us on Instagram at Our Prenup Lawyer, and listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and watch us on YouTube. See you guys next time.